The phone rang at 9:47 that evening. Rita Moreno was alone in her Los Angeles apartment, still wearing the costume from that evening's stage rehearsal. When she picked up the receiver, she heard the voice of a friend from the studio, breathless and hesitant, speaking with the knowledge of how the words she was about to say would shatter Rita's world. Marlon Brando had gotten married that afternoon to Movita Castaneda, a private ceremony just reported on the news. Rita thanked him, hung up, and froze. 8 years. She had waited 8 years, forgiven, hoped. Brando had told her each time it was coming soon, "Be patient, you're different." And now he was on his honeymoon with another woman. Rita couldn't move. She just stood there, silent and broken, as the walls closed in on her. There was a heaviness in her chest. She couldn't breathe. Her heartbeat was irregular. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Then her feet moved toward the bathroom, her steps automatic. She opened the medicine cabinet. The Seconal bottle was there, sleeping pills her doctor had prescribed 6 months ago, for anxiety, for pain. She opened the cap and poured all the pills into her palm. 30, maybe 35. She didn't count. She swallowed them one by one, drank water from the tap, staggered to the bedroom, and lay down. The ceiling began to spin. Her heartbeat slowed. Her eyes grew heavy. And Rita Moreno, Hollywood's rising star, Oscar nominee for West Side Story, the talent adored by millions, was lying there in her bed, preparing to die. Because Marlon Brando had married another woman, and Rita no longer wanted to live. But something happened in her subconscious, in her survival instinct. Rita picked up the phone, dialed a number with trembling fingers, whispered 3 words, and passed out. The ambulance arrived within 12 minutes. The paramedics broke down the door, found Rita in bed, her pulse barely detectable, her lips blue, not breathing. They placed her on a stretcher and carried her to the ambulance, sirens blaring, heading for Cedars-Sinai Hospital. In the emergency room, doctors hooked her stomach to a pump, gave her activated charcoal, inserted needles into her veins, and hooked her up to monitors. Rita's mother, Rosa, arrived, collapsed in the hallway, cried, and prayed. The doctors said that if they had arrived 20 minutes later, Rita would have died. The dose of Seconal she had taken was enough to kill 2 people. Her body was shutting down, her kidneys were slowing, her brain was losing oxygen. But she was fighting, still fighting to live. And this fight lasted for hours, all night long, until morning. While Rita Moreno was fighting for her life in the hospital, Marlon Brando was on his honeymoon with his new wife, unaware, unconcerned. But this night, this terrifying night, was the result of 8 years, and the story had begun much earlier. If you enjoyed this story and would like to subscribe for more, please click the subscribe button. Now, let's go back 8 years and tell the story of how Rita Moreno met Marlon Brando, how she fell in love, and how she was drawn into a relationship that nearly ended in death. It was the fall of 1954. Rita Moreno was 23 years old and struggling in Hollywood. She had been in the industry since she was 13. She had danced, she had sung, she had appeared in dozens of films, but it was always the same thing, always the same pattern. Exotic girl, background dancer, Latin stereotype. Her talent didn't matter, only her appearance did. A Puerto Rican girl, dark-skinned, with an exotic accent, perfect for Hollywood's Latina fantasy, but never good enough for real roles. Rita was tired, disappointed, but she wouldn't give up because dancing, performing, captivating audiences, was her lifeblood. That afternoon she was at her agency's office, dealing with yet another rejection letter, when the door opened and Marlon Brando walked in. Rita had never met him before, but she knew him. Everyone did. Brando was 30 years old and already a legend. His performance in A Streetcar Named Desire had taken Broadway by storm, and On the Waterfront had won him an Oscar. When he entered a room, the atmosphere changed. Everyone was drawn to him, because Brando wasn't just an actor. He was a force, a magnetic field. And that afternoon, his eyes turned to Rita. He looked, really looked, not with a superficial Hollywood gaze, but deeply, as if he could see every hidden pain, every suppressed longing inside Rita. Then they started talking. At first it was small talk, the agency arranged introduction, but the conversation deepened. It lasted for hours. The agency closed. They went outside, went to a cafe, had dinner. It was midnight and they were still talking about acting, about method acting, about the Stanislavski system, about the relationship between art and reality. Brando talked to Rita about breaking the roles imposed on her by society, about finding her true self, about not wasting her talent on trashy films. Rita had never heard anyone speak to her like this before. No one had ever taken her talent so seriously. No one had ever valued her so much. And when Brando kissed her that night, Rita Moreno felt that her whole life had been leading up to this moment. She had finally been seen, finally understood, finally loved. But in reality, Rita Moreno was experiencing the first day of an 8-year prison sentence. She just didn't know it yet. The first 3 months were magical. Brando was utterly captivating, intelligent, funny, sensitive, fragile. He took Rita on walks along the beach, sat with her in Santa Monica restaurants at midnight, shared his own traumas. He talked about his father, Marlon Brando Sr., a violent, abusive, cruel man. He talked about his mother, Dodie, a stranded actress and a secret alcoholic. He recounted spending his childhood in Omaha, finding his mother drunk every night, carrying her to the bathroom, holding her hair. Rita listened and opened her heart because she could see Brando's pain. She could see his wound. Maybe she could heal him. Maybe her love could save him. She would later realize how naive that dream was, because cracks began to appear over time. Brando forgot to call. He didn't show up for their planned meetings, disappearing without explanation. Sometimes he didn't contact her for days, then suddenly reappeared, without apologizing, as if nothing had happened. When Rita asked questions, Brando would get angry, become defensive, say he felt pressured. Rita would back off because she was afraid of losing him. And so a dynamic was created. Brando was in control. Rita was submissive. When Brando pulled away, Rita moved closer. When Brando betrayed her, Rita forgave him. Because Brando always came back, always apologized, always used his trauma, his father, his childhood as an excuse. And Rita believed him. She wanted to believe him. But then that day came and everything changed. Rita went to Brando's house on Mulholland Drive to surprise him. She knocked on the door, no one answered, but the door was ajar. She went inside, called out, no answer. Then she went up the stairs, walked towards the bedroom, and saw him. Marlon Brando was in bed with another woman. The woman was naked, shocked, tugging at the sheets. Brando didn't move. He just lay there, looking at Rita, those famous eyelids half closed, his expression blank. Rita froze. Words didn't come. Breath didn't come. Just a sinking feeling in her chest, as if her heart had truly stopped. She waited, waiting for Brando to say something, to apologize, to explain, to show panic. But Brando just stared, and Rita understood. Brando wasn't ashamed, he wasn't sorry, he was just annoyed that Rita had barged in. Rita turned around, ran down the stairs, opened the door, got in her car, and drove away. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her vision blurred, her heart shattered. When she got home, she cried for hours, curled up in her bed, in pain, and then she decided it was over. Marlon Brando was over. Never again. But 3 days later, Brando called. His voice was soft, almost fragile. He apologized. He said he was sick. He said he didn't know how to love. His father had destroyed him. His mother had abandoned him. He had lost himself. Rita listened and opened her heart again. Because she could see Brando's pain. She could see his childhood. She could see his wound. And maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe her love could change him. She didn't know how foolish that hope was. In the years that followed, the same cycle repeated itself 10 times, 20 times, 50 times. Brando betrayed her. Rita cried. Brando apologized. Rita forgave him. Brando betrayed her again, and each time, another piece of Rita died inside. She lost another piece of herself. She gave up another piece of her self-worth. 8 years passed like this, and Rita Moreno disappeared in Marlon Brando's shadow. In 1960, Rita Moreno seized the biggest opportunity of her career. West Side Story, the film adaptation of Broadway's legendary musical, was one of Hollywood's most anticipated projects. Rita was cast as Anita, a strong, fiery, unbreakable character. The production was a massive operation. Jerome Robbins's choreography was demanding. Robert Wise's direction was meticulous, and rehearsals were exhausting. But Rita loved every moment because she finally had a real role, finally a character outside the box, finally a chance to showcase her talent. Anita was a vehicle through which Rita could channel all her passion, all her strength, all her pain. She shone in front of the camera. She was electric when she danced. She poured her soul out when she sang. Her castmates were in awe. Directors praised her. Studio executives saw a future star. But when the camera stopped rolling, Rita would go to the costume room, lock herself in the bathroom, and cry. Because outside the set, her life was still controlled by Marlon Brando. Brando was still cheating, still disappearing, still coming back, still humiliating Rita. Rita would come to the set in the mornings, her eyes swollen, her heart heavy, the makeup artist trying to cover up the problems. During lunch breaks, she would sit alone, not eating, smoking, trying to suppress the pain. In the evenings, on the way home, she would cry in the car, unseen. Her castmates noticed something was wrong, but didn't ask questions. Everyone in Hollywood had secrets. Rita's were just heavier, more destructive, consuming her. By the time filming for West Side Story wrapped, Rita was exhausted. Her performance was magnificent. Critics showered her with praise, and Oscar talk began. The film was released in December 1961 and became a phenomenon. Rita Moreno became a superstar overnight. Everyone knew her name. Magazine covers featured her. Award ceremonies invited her. But Rita couldn't feel it because success was meaningless. The applause was empty. All she wanted was Marlon Brando's love, and that was the one thing she couldn't have. In the winter of 1961, Rita became pregnant. She was scared at first, but then hope emerged. Maybe this would change everything. Maybe becoming a father would mature Brando. Maybe a family would stabilize him. Rita called Brando, wanted to meet, needed to tell him something important. Brando arrived late as usual, indifferent. Rita broke the news, showed him the positive test result, and waited. Brando's face didn't change. There was no joy, no excitement, just a cold calculation. He frowned, looked out the window, and there was a long silence. Then he turned and asked, "What do you want to do?" As if this was Rita's problem, Rita's decision, Rita's burden. Rita couldn't answer because she could see the truth. Brando didn't want this baby. He didn't want this family. He didn't want this responsibility. Brando stood up, took money out of his pocket, left it on the table, and said, "You'll find someone who can take care of this." And he left. Rita sat at that table, watched the money, felt the life inside her, and cried. What hurt wasn't Brando leaving her. She already knew that. She'd lived it 100 times before. What hurt was that he still loved her, still imagined a future with her, still believed, still forgave. A few weeks later, Rita had a miscarriage. Medically, it was a natural miscarriage. The doctors said these things happen. Your body wasn't ready. But Rita knew. She knew the truth. Her body had decided this baby wasn't possible. This relationship wasn't possible. This future wasn't possible. While she was in the hospital, Brando didn't call, didn't visit, didn't send flowers, didn't even care. Rita was alone. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand, crying. When Rita was discharged, she returned home and felt nothing. She was numb, drained, soulless. This numbness lasted for months. West Side Story premiered. The reviews were rave. The award nominations came. The Oscars approached. But Rita couldn't feel it because she was dead inside. She went on stage. She smiled. She was applauded. But there was nothing inside her. Only emptiness. Only pain. Only the shadow of Marlon Brando. February 1962. Rita Moreno was 29 years old, at the peak of her career. West Side Story had made her a legend. She had received an Oscar nomination. Hollywood was at her feet. But something inside her was dying, a little more every day, a little more every hour. Brando was still in her life, still coming and going, still making promises, still betraying her. Rita no longer fought, no longer cried. She just accepted it. Because after 8 years, she no longer had the strength to fight. That evening she was at home, alone, tired. The phone rang. It was a friend from the studio. He said Marlon Brando had gotten married to Movita Castaneda that afternoon, a private ceremony. It had just been reported on the news. Rita thanked him and hung up. She couldn't move. She just stood there. The living room was dark. Silence filled her ears. 8 years. She had waited 8 years. She had hoped for 8 years. And Brando had chosen someone else. Not Rita. He would never choose Rita. Something broke inside her chest, a physical pain. She couldn't breathe. She went to the bathroom. She opened the medicine cabinet. She saw the Seconal bottle. She opened the cap. She poured out the pills. She didn't count them. She swallowed them. With water, one by one. She went to the bedroom. She lay down. The ceiling began to spin. Her eyes closed. And Rita Moreno prepared to die. But at the last moment, her subconscious did something. She picked up the phone. She called a friend. She whispered 3 words. "Help! Pills! Come!" And she passed out. The ambulance arrived in 12 minutes. The paramedics broke down the door and found Rita in bed. Her pulse was weak. She wasn't breathing. Her lips were blue. They put her on a stretcher, carried her to the ambulance, and turned on the sirens. On the way to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, Rita's heart stopped twice. They used a defibrillator and brought her back. In the emergency room, the doctors went into battle mode. Stomach pump, activated charcoal, IV, oxygen, monitor. Rita's mother, Rosa, arrived, collapsed in the hallway, prayed, cried. The doctors said it was too late. If she had arrived 20 minutes later, she would have died. The dose she took was enough to kill 2 people. Her body was shutting down, her kidneys were slowing, her brain was losing oxygen. But Rita was fighting. Unconsciously, instinctively, she was fighting to live. Hours passed. The monitor beeped. Doctors came and went. Night turned to morning. Rita was still unconscious, but her pulse was strengthening. Her breathing was returning. In the afternoon, her eyes opened. Her throat burned. Her stomach churned. Her arm was full of needles. Her mother was there, crying, holding her hand. The doctor came, looked at Rita, and said, "You're lucky. You're alive." Rita couldn't respond because she didn't feel lucky. She just felt empty. The psychiatrist came and asked questions. Rita couldn't answer. How could she explain that she loved a man so much that she tried to destroy herself? How could she say that for 8 years she threw her own worth at someone's feet? She stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Brando didn't call. He didn't send flowers. He didn't visit. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he knew but didn't care. Rita didn't care anymore because she finally understood. Marlon Brando had never loved her. He had used her, possessed her, controlled her, but he hadn't loved her. And Rita had been caught up in an illusion for 8 years. When she was discharged, she made a vow. She would never, ever go back to Marlon Brando. And she didn't. The following months were difficult. Rita went to therapy, took antidepressants, tried to rebuild herself. She went to the West Side Story Oscar ceremony, where she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. She didn't win, but she received a standing ovation. She didn't take the stage, but she survived. And that was enough. Slowly, she began to heal. She continued to take roles, appeared on stage, danced. One day, she met Leonard Gordon. Leonard was a cardiologist, a doctor, a calm, gentle, balanced man. He was the complete opposite of Marlon Brando. He didn't play games, he didn't manipulate, he didn't betray. Sadak was there, reliable, honest, real. Rita couldn't feel it at first because she was used to Brando's chaos, his adrenaline, his cycle of drama. Leonard's calmness seemed strange, but slowly she realized this was normal, this was healthy. Love should be like this, without fighting, without tears, without pain. In 1965, Rita and Leonard got married. Their marriage lasted 45 years, until Leonard died of cancer in 2010. It was a happy, peaceful, balanced marriage. Rita later said in interviews, "Leonard saved me. Marlon almost killed me, but Leonard taught me how to live again." Rita continued her career. She won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, a Tony. She became one of the few artists to own an EGOT. She became a legend, an icon. But the 8 years she spent with Marlon Brando never left her. Even after she turned 70, she still talked about that period, still felt the pain. In an interview, she said, "Loving him was destroying myself." And she almost succeeded, she said. Marlon Brando never apologized. Even after Rita's suicide attempt, he never reached out. Never. Years passed. Brando's life descended into chaos. His children experienced tragedy. Christian committed murder. Cheyenne committed suicide. Brando became obese. His health collapsed. He became isolated. When he died in 2004, Rita heard the news and felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, just emptiness, because that man, the man young Rita had fallen in love with, had died years ago. Maybe he had never existed. Maybe he was just an illusion, bright and dangerous. Rita Moreno is 92 today, still alive, still strong. She gave 8 years to Marlon Brando, but she gave the remaining 60 to herself. She survived, she shone, she won. Her story is not just a love tragedy, it is a story of survival. Young women listening to Rita might see something, the signs of toxic relationships, that love shouldn't hurt. Maybe a woman is in the same cycle right now. Maybe Rita's voice reaches her. Go. Go now. Because if you wait 8 years, what you lose is yourself. Rita Moreno lost 8 years, but she regained her soul. And that might be the greatest victory.